following program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.
Every day, citizens around the country are faced with new dilemmas that affect them profoundly. Whether it's injustice, discrimination, falling through the cracks, scandals and cronyism, balances of power, ethics, religious freedoms, state versus citizens, and unfunded mandates, and the list goes on and on and on. Welcome to Speak Up. It's directed at those who have fallen through the cracks, and it gives them a voice. It's your turn to speak up, to stand up and fight back.
Welcome to Speak Up. I'm Kevin Avard, your host. Today we're going to be talking about the Second Amendment and about your rights to protect yourself. We're going to be talking about firearms. And I brought on today's show a couple of people that are in the forefront of fighting for your rights, to fight for your rights here in the state of New Hampshire. I want to welcome J.R. Hoell, State Representative, and of course Susan Olsen. And we're going to be talking about a new pack here in New Hampshire. It's called PackingNH.
Right.
And welcome to the show, first of all.
Thank you, Kevin. It's nice to be here.
Thank you. You know, JR, honestly, serving in the House, I know that if you want to talk about firearms, who's the first person you go to talk to? Obviously, it's going to be J.R. Hoell.
Well, thank you. So there's a lot of gun groups in the state, and Susan and I realized after the 2012 election results and after the majority leader sponsoring HB 135, the repeal of Stand Your Ground, that it was time to do something different, that the old methods of trying to put good people in the legislature who would support the Second Amendment weren't as effective as they needed to be. So we formed a political action committee called PackingNH. And it was an intentional pun on packing heat is a way that people have long time referred to the ability to carry a firearm concealed. And it meshed well with the political action committee. So we formed this with the intent to recruit and help support and put people in office who actually respect the rights, the natural rights that are enumerated in the Constitution.
It's funny, when you drive up into New Hampshire, you do see that live free or die. I mean, that's such a radical term, you know, but it's a great term. I've grown up with that.
It's also about protecting those around you, right? At the end of the day, we see this all the time in news story after news story, that when someone is intent on doing evil or harm, it's the good guy who's there to protect the others around them.
You've actually had to protect yourself in what state did you?
That was in southwestern Virginia.
Southwestern Virginia.
I've been a gun owner since I was 25 years old. And I grew up in Dallas, and you would think everyone in Texas probably gets a firearm when they're born, but in my family, we didn't have them. I had a cute little old grandma with a shotgun, but that was for killing groundhogs, not for defending herself. But I found myself and our family business in a situation of having to defend ourselves against some folks who didn't think we had the right to operate our business.
Right.
And it never occurred to me that somebody would come after me with a firearm because they disagreed with me. But it got my attention, and ever since then, I have been a faithful firearm owner. I am, in fact, an NRA certified instructor, so I understand, as does JR, the importance of not only just owning a firearm for self-defense, but how to protect yourself, how to be safe with a firearm, how to be smart, how to protect yourself, your family, and others.
It seems to me that whenever we hear these sensational stories in the news, and they are sensational, where somebody goes in, they have they're loaded to the teeth, and they might even have a knife on them. And they're going after innocent people, but they're not going into crowds where they know people are armed.
Oh, no.
They're going into places where they're unarmed. They would never think twice about going into a place where there were, say, the New Hampshire legislature, where you have a half a dozen or a dozen legislatures that are carrying 9mm. Or
Well, part of this is their only fear is failure. They don't, at the end of the day, they want to be successful at creating terror, and they want their name in the paper forever. That's their motivation. They, through the gaming industry, through watching Hollywood, whatever, they've desensitized themselves to the loss of life. They don't care about others, and they've gotten to a point where their only fear is not being successful.
And the media aid and abet them by giving them that post-mortem fame,
right.
and sensationalizing it. And who hasn't seen accounts, horrific accounts of things that have happened, and the media seem to rub their little hands together and climb on those dead bodies and try to increase their ratings. It's really quite despicable.
You know, it seems as though our society, there's something happening, and it's the spirit in the country, where, well, recently we had 2 little girls that stabbed another little girl 19 times, and then you had one little boy who stabbed another little girl because he wouldn't date her. They wanted to snuff him out. You have people that are shooting people just because they want to see what it feels like, or going around randomly picking people off. And the point I'm trying to make is it's not it's the intent. Why are people doing this in our society?
We had this argument, this discussion last night online, and the point is, and Psychology Today has actually studied this, that through the gaming industry, through Hollywood, people are getting desensitized to the violence in America. We're encouraging it through entertainment, and at the end of the day, these people who are in serious need of some help, okay, end up becoming a problem. And I'm not just saying a mental health issue, right? It's people throughout the spectrum who have become desensitized to violence.
Do you remember the Marlboro Man?
Of course.
Winston tastes good like a cigarette should. I mean, that's still in my head, right?
Yeah.
Now, why am I bringing that up with this gun control? But it goes to your point.
Right.
They removed those cigarette ads because they influence people to smoke.
Right.
Yet they can show Rambo. They can show any Born
absolutely.
Identity or anything. Any type of show where there's violence, and that won't influence bad behavior. But my gosh, you put a cigarette commercial on there, you're in trouble.
But wait a minute, why is the federal government using videos and electronic media effectively to train soldiers? Well, wait a minute, if we can train a soldier through this, right?
Why would an impressionable young person not
who's
take that
12
on
years
board
old,
and
10 years old, who's literally sitting in front of a video game hours after hour, okay, learning to shoot people?
You know what's really frightening? It really, and this is the truth. When you see just an average kid in a group setting, and he's standing there, and he's just not associating with all the other kids, you do a little further research, and you find out, well, he spends 8 to 9 hours shooting, bang bang on the Xbox. That's his liberty. He has the very right to do that. But what I'm thinking is garbage in, garbage out. As a person thinks, so is he or she. Are we allowing them to self-destruct in such a way that we're creating zombies that have no feeling?
Well, and that was the whole point of the Psychology Today article that talks about this, that we intentionally, by allowing our children to do this, or society allowing the children to do this, have desensitized them to what is effectively murdering others. It devalues human life, and it's unacceptable. But yet we go blame inanimate objects. Okay, well, I'm going to take the California murder incident just recently, right? People were stabbed, people were run over with a car, but it was the gun's fault. No, it wasn't the gun's fault, right? Okay, more people were killed with a knife, but it was the gun's fault. No, it's not the gun's fault. And it isn't even those who have a mental illness, because people want to try and link those two issues. At the end of the day, it's we as society, let's tackle the real issue, have desensitized ourselves to the violent nature of some people, and we need to take a hard look at it.
Well, I think certainly there's that, but these young people, kiddos and teenagers and even young people into their 20s that watch these video games, that play these video games and see these movies, they know it's not real, but how, where does that line blur between, well, they're not really dead, so we can do this, transferring something that they see on a movie into reality and then being shocked when someone actually dies is problematic. I don't know that that's been looked at, but we don't let children, seems to me, be children. We don't let them go out and play outside. I just saw this morning on some horrible television station news program that dodgeball, honestly, has been done away with.
I heard that this morning.
And now it's going to be archery, which I found shocking. Fly fishing. And make nice things for physical education instead of actual physical movement. So,
and what's frightening is that you have ICE or Al-Qaeda across the country teaching children how to kill, and from a very young age. You cut people's heads off. That's their world, and they're being trained on a regular, and they're being brainwashed. I'm not paranoid, but I think when you have thousands of people crossing our borders on a regular basis, when you don't know who's coming in. Right. Could it be Al-Qaeda? Could ICE be coming into our country? How are you going to defend yourself if your politicians start voting to take away your guns? They're not going to be. Their guns aren't going to be taken away. They're coming after you.
And that's the whole thing about trying to solve this legislatively. Okay, statutes only affect those who obey the law to begin with.
Right.
Exactly.
And the person who's going to commit a felony or has committed a felony isn't worried about breaking yet another law. Mm-hmm. So the laws have very little effect on the criminals.
Senator Smith, he's running for.
Yes.
He's been a very strong supporter of this.
He's been an absolutely strong supporter.
Absolutely, to his own problems as well. His how long was he on the floor defending the Second Amendment at his own peril,
right?
Political peril.
After Columbine, right, when everybody was shouting, this goes back over 10 years ago.
Right.
Okay, another mass murder. Okay, where people actually spend time. When you go back and look in front of video games, there's a better link there than anywhere else. But no one wants to discuss that little hidden sin in there. He spent on the floor trying to stop this, and was very successful. He was the one who passed the law to allow arming of pilots, which has been far more effective in terms of securing airplanes than the TSA has ever been or ever will be.
Right. It's one of those things. I've mentioned him on a couple of stand-ups because I'm actually running for state senate as well. But he seems to be one of the only politicians that I can recall, other than maybe Reagan, maybe a few others, but where you don't get that kick in the gut. You don't get that. He lied or he pulled his punches. He's always, in my opinion, been a straight shooter and come hell or high water. And I'm not so sure about the other people that are running against him. I don't have a lot of experience with movements, but I don't know about.
So there's, I think, like 10 or 12 people who have filed for U.S. Senate running from New Hampshire on just the Republican side. Right. And I think there may actually be a primary for Shaheen. I have to go back and look. I know there's a primary for Hassan on the Democratic side. But at the end of the day, only 3 of those have any real name recognition, right, which would be Rubin, Smith, and Brown, right? Mm-hmm. Karen Tesserman having dropped out already. Of those 3, right, when there's debates, one's noticeably absent, making commitments. Oh, I can't be there. I've got another commitment. It's coming Wednesday.
Has he shown up to any debates?
He hasn't shown up to a debate. He showed up at an event a couple of 3 weeks ago in Concord before the gun owners of New Hampshire. And
is that publicized anywhere?
Well, so he requested that there be no videotaping. He requested complete control of the media for that event. He shepherded people out, even people who belong to gun clubs in the state, right? Mm-hmm. He didn't think that those questions would be appropriate. So he's controlling the entire messaging of that event.
That's not New Hampshire.
That's not New Hampshire way. It doesn't sit well with people from New Hampshire. No. So at the end of the day, someone does sneak a camera in, and there's this video segment that goes on for 34 minutes or so of him talking about the fact that, oh yeah, I applied to my chief of police, but I'm waiting for the references to check out. It was about 6 weeks ago. We all know the New Hampshire statutes, those of us who care about the firearms, And it's 2 weeks. It's 14 days. It's clear. So he either accused his chief in Rye of lying, or he's lying. There's no other way to take this. So he catches that on video, he backtracks a little bit, and then a couple of minutes later he tells the guy to turn the videotape off. Yeah. That's not acceptable behavior. I mean, that's not the New Hampshire way. You go out and meet people, you're honest, and as you said about Senator Smith, he's very open and honest. People may not agree with some of his views, okay? Right. But at the end of the day, he tells it like he's going to vote. And I appreciate the honesty more so than necessarily always agreeing with what they're going to say.
I think now more than ever, you know, when you find that the IRS has lost 2 years of tapes, you have the Benghazi situation, you have. Oh,
but they caught the guy today, didn't you hear that?
Well, yeah, they caught him. That's interesting. I just think it's a time. At this time, it's so little, so late at this point. What I'm tired about is the lack of transparency, the lack of accountability, and I swear, having served in the New Hampshire House in 2010 through 12, I'm thinking the federal government looked at New Hampshire and said, "That's how we'll do it." Because there seems to be no accountability in this state when it comes to whether it's Jeff Frost or the Attorney General's office, FRM, the family courts, a number of issues.
I agree. We bring up Benghazi, right? Mm-hmm. We put in a bill, it's filed last September on the 1-year anniversary, or just after the 1-year anniversary of Benghazi, okay? Not knowing what the legislative season was going to be like. We get it up. The same day it's heard in the hearing in the House in state and federal relations, the day before that day the Senate releases their findings, and the committee says, "Oh, we don't need to do anything on this. It's settled. See, there's a report out." No, we really need to dig a little bit further. Bill comes out, an expedient to legislate, dies on the floor. Now, several months later, there's still issues. Why didn't we pass this resolution saying, hey, this is important. We need to put more pressure on forming an independent committee to go actually investigate this and give them the power, if necessary, to subpoena people.
Yeah. You were going to say something?
I was going to say, when you're talking about getting things done or finding and producing results, 2 years ago, I had filed a complaint with the Attorney General's office on what were some campaign violations that were going on in my district, and did it via phone call and electronic communication, and figured, well, you know, so much for that. Believe it or not, today, what is it, June 17th? Is today the 17th? I received 2 letters, photocopies of 2 letters from the Attorney General's office today saying, well, these were copies of the letters to the particular representatives who were the center of it. And they said, well, you know, you did break the law, but you admitted and you fixed it, so we consider the matter closed.
In the meantime, your votes were watered down. Right. Sure. And the some elections that were only won by 70
votes. There was my favorite one, right, which was Deerfield and Nottingham. It was a floterial over there. It was former Representative Don Gorman versus current Representative Maureen Mann. Okay, 4,500 votes cast for both parties. Okay, the difference before the recount was 13 votes. The difference after the recount was 21. 21 votes over 4,500. These are small percentages.
It makes a difference. And the fact that the Attorney General won't enforce the laws, but then they'll go in like stormtroopers after, say, Jeff Frost, or they'll try to intimidate Mike Gill, or, you know, there are a lot of people that are hurting in the state, whether they're firefighters or state or police that you know, they've gone through divorce, they've lost custody of their children or their pensions, and they've not broken the law. But my golly, you better get a background check, you better go through your anger management, you better go through all this. In the meantime, they don't realize that their civil rights are being violated by the courts. And what's troubling to me is there's power, and they're not accountable to anybody in New Hampshire. And what they do is they wait you out.
Well, and
I think that's a very good way of putting it. They just They wait you out. They have more time than you do.
And there's been a barrage of legislation lately to try to control people.
All right.
Right, through the gun legislation.
Well, and that was just it. Over the past 2 years, we've seen a number of gun bills filed, or anti-gun bills filed, starting with HB 135, several others, 1589. And in each case, through grassroots activism, the gun owners got up and made phone calls and wrote letters to the editor and emails. And
Showed up at hearings en masse.
SB 244, all of these bills died. Almost all of them died in the House, even though it was controlled by Democrats. Why? Because at the end of the day, those in office know that gun owners vote, they vote consistently, and they don't want to lose their seat in Concord over a universal background check. It's not worth it. They're up there for some other reason.
Who's the boogeyman in New Hampshire that's pushing all this legislation?
Well, there was various groups, right? There was the group at the Seacoast.
There's a number of them. There's part of it's under the umbrella of an organization called Granite State Progress.
Oh, yes. I think
yeah, but there's a number of other groups that have sprung up, branches of Mr. Bloomberg's various groups. There's Moms Demand Action. There's Newcastle Promise. There's another one whose name escapes me right now, but
that's basically off the Castle Doctrine.
Well, they came in. They were pushing for the universal background checks.
Yes.
They were pushing for the repeal of stand your ground. They were pushing for the mental health. The mental health bill, was opposed by all the civil rights groups.
Senate
right?
Bill 244 would have required the state of New Hampshire to report to the National Instant Criminal Background Safety Check the names of anyone who'd gone through the mental health system, whether they were violent or not, whether my mother who couldn't look after her affairs anymore but had been adjudicated by a court that she needed a guardian, her name would have gone to the FBI and she would have been considered a criminal.
Or somebody who's gone through a divorce. And said,
and needed some help.
And needed some
And had an involuntary guardian appointed, right?
Sure.
You are out drinking, you stub your toe, you end up in the hospital, right? In the emergency room, and you're suicidal that night because you've had a really bad day and you've, I don't know, circumstances
forced by the course to go to alcohol,
and all of a sudden lost your job, pending divorce with your spouse, and all of this leads you to being, at that time, under those conditions, to being somewhat suicidal, and they put you in involuntary remission. Guess what? That means you've lost your natural right to protect yourself forever. Even if that is not a typical state of mind for that person, even if that was just a spur of the moment, off the cuff emotional response to the admitting doctor.
Shall not infringed means shall not infringe.
I think that's in English, actually.
But we have that also part of our First Amendment too, right? I mean, we're not supposed to infringe upon the First Amendment as well. Isn't that correct?
Well, bear in mind, Kevin, that civilian firearm ownership is what freed the colonies from British rule. Mm-hmm. It wasn't standing military. It wasn't hired mercenaries. It was civilians who owned firearms that took up the cause and got rid of the British. There has always been the natural right of self-defense. Mm-hmm. The Bill of Rights was attached to the Constitution in 1789, I believe, and ultimately
1791 passed, right?
It was 93 when they were ultimately ratified. So well after the Revolutionary War had ended, well after the Articles of Confederation were being modified to make sure that if there was ever another complication, that the states would pay their fair share, if you will. That Bill of Rights merely acknowledged those natural rights. So you can't infringe on something that doesn't exist. The Second Amendment didn't create that right.
It's just
it told the government that lay off. We have that right.
And it's not about hunting. I mean, I've heard that response from a number of people. It was clearly about preventing a tyranny of the government.
Well, we just came out of a Revolutionary War.
Right.
And the people have a right to bear arms.
These people lost their sons, their fathers, their brothers, right, in the war. The people who were writing these knew the cost personally. It was a high price that their families had paid. They understood it.
So I was talking to somebody recently, just like a week ago maybe, 42 Democrats voted to infringe upon the First Amendment. They were going to try to amend the First Amendment in Congress. No, that wasn't going to happen.
Right.
But they had the gall to do it. They have the mindset that they know better than our founders to do it. They come across with this whole notion, well, you know, it's an old document. The Constitution is old. Slavery is older.
Well,
And that the point is they have this mindset that they can get around what it says. And when I hear the words "thou shalt not infringe upon,"
yes.
It means thou shalt not infringe upon. You can't get any clearer than that. And yet, constantly, every year, every legislative period, you hear people saying.
Well, and this goes back to why we formed PackingNH, right?
Absolutely.
We know historically that the gun owners vote in the state, okay, and they vote reasonably consistently across both party lines. So it's not a party issue.
We have manufacturers in the state.
We have a lot of manufacturers. We have a lot of jobs.
Wonderful jobs.
Right? We don't want to see a repeat of what happened in Connecticut, where the Connecticut legislator and then the governor signed this bill, and pretty soon you're seeing firearm company after firearm company after firearm company pack up and leave the state. That's
Which
not
our
what-
governor didn't bother to go and chase and bring to New Hampshire.
Right. Well, I mean, there was a number of sitting state reps who went after those companies politely and wrote letters asking them to come to New Hampshire.
Right.
We had a shot at Ruger setting up yet another manufacturing plant in the state, and we lost it over a right-to-work issue. They were incredibly clear in the Union Leader article. That was what cost several hundred jobs in the state.
We don't see a whole lot of industries moving to New Hampshire lately, do we?
Well, we've de-incentivized it based on the tax structure, based on the requirements. We have more regulations than most of the other states. It's time to fix that.
Yeah.
And
Is it true that we have as many regulations or are as regulated as California? I remember Spectower saying something.
I've heard that. I've heard that we're actually more regulated than any other state. I don't know, but you find the anomalies, right? To be a hairdresser, you need to have 800 hours. Here's my favorite one, right? To be 800 hours worth of instruction and training to be a hairdresser, but to be a commercial pilot, it's 300 hours. That makes no sense to
Let me
me.
ask you a question. Does that guarantee you're going to get a good haircut?
No. At the end of the day, former Representative Cohen made a big deal about this, that it doesn't make a difference. That if you go and get a bad haircut, you're not going back to that barber or that hairstylist.
And licensing doesn't necessarily guarantee that the business is going to be on the up and up. Think of, and I have to keep bringing this up, because it galls me when I think about it, but FRM. A lot of people think it was just a bad Ponzi scheme. No, this Ponzi scheme was basically Governor Lynch's attorney set up the FRM, Peter Hildreth from the Banking Commission,
Yeah.
and his brothers. Well, his brothers were involved with investing in this FRM scandal, and he was the head of the banking and saying, yeah, everything's on the up and up. And people were complaining to the Attorney General's office saying, hey, where's my money, where's my money? And they're doing this,
Right.
but they were licensed.
Well,
They were licensed.
So that's what makes the state. So that's the whole thing about licensing. If the state is going to be in there, then I think the state owns the responsibility and the liability. But that's not what we're seeing at all.
No, yeah, and I know that's an issue with some people. I think the people that broke the law their pension should end up, because Peter Hildreth actually walked out of one of the hearings and got a nice pension, just like Lois Lerner. That's why I say, you know, they can break the law, they can go through these hearings, they can retire, and then they get this nice fast pension. Meanwhile, the taxpayers are stuck holding the bag, and that's not right.
No. So this comes back. All of this is clear examples of the ills that we're seeing within government.
Right.
And the way to fix that, honestly, we believe, is to put good, Constitution abiding and respecting legislators in office. And we've done the hard work so far in terms of recruiting a number of people to run this time, and now we're in the midst of raising money to help support them to get into office.
Now, how do people find Packing New Hampshire?
So PackingNH.org.
PackingNH.
Just
Right,
like it
on,
sounds.
right, yep, just like it sounds.
you have
like
a Facebook page?
We have well, the Facebook page is more a firearms discussion page. We have training articles. We follow court rulings. We we have some fun with even target practice and gun reviews. It's more a place where firearms enthusiasts can chat.
Right.
We don't get into a lot of politics, and we certainly don't talk about candidates. But Packing New Hampshire is specifically geared. www.PackingNH is geared towards finding, vetting, supporting strong.
And just to be clear, right, this is not in competition with the other gun groups in the state. That wasn't why it was set up, right? There are other gun groups in the state. This was one where Going to Olsen, New Hampshire has multiple things it's involved in. It's in instruction and helping range protection, a bunch of other things. The shooting clubs, as well as legislatively. New Hampshire Firearms Coalition is almost exclusively legislatively grading bills and talking about whether candidates did what they said they were going to do or didn't. So those groups are out there. This group was purely supplemental in nature to make sure we could raise the funds necessary to put people in office.
Right. Are there any particular candidates that come to mind that you support?
When we file the financial filing forms, there will be clear and open and honest records of where the money came in and how we raised it for the candidates.
Well, but we're also putting together a candidate survey, as many organizations do, with very specific questions to which we expect answers. And based upon the answers that we receive, we'll be grading and vetting. And certainly, yes, there are candidates who obviously come to mind on both sides. On the
It's
yes
not just one
and
party.
Oh yeah, no, it crosses party lines, and this is true.
That's
Right?
interesting because it does cross party lines.
Education crosses party lines. Second Amendment stuff crosses party lines. There's a lot of marijuana issues cross party lines. So there's a lot of issues that are not necessarily one party or the other, but help us figure out which candidates actually believe in limited government and pro-freedom and pro-personal responsibility, and which one don't.
And the ones that can be trusted to respect the people who elect them.
Right, and keep their word. That's such a big thing.
Oh, it is.
See, what a concept, Kevin.
Yeah.
Well, no, it really is. I mean, I remember Don Gorman. When we went up to the Capitol, we were going through the training. Actually, JR was one of the first people I met. And it was I was just kind of sitting there and thinking, oh, this is a lot of responsibility. And you just kind of walked over, and it was a good meet. But I remember Don Gorman, he trains people with firearms as well, and he said, we were just having a chat, and he said, listen, whatever you do, when you give your word, you have to keep it. Because once you give that up, you're never going to be trusted again. And you have to. And the voters have to do that. You're golden. As long as you keep your word.
His comment was, it's the only equity or only currency you have at the State House. Spend it wisely.
Yeah, spend it wisely, and when you keep it, keep it. Even if you don't like what you just committed to, you got to keep it.
Absolutely, you do. And that should be your same application in life. If you give your children your word, you should keep it. If you give your business partner or your wife or your husband your word, it should be good.
Right.
Just because it's a voter doesn't mean that they have any less value. In fact, they've trusted you with more sometimes.
You brought up education. Now, this Common Core thing is people are just outraged over this.
Oh, it is. It's a bad idea. And there's an entire, I'll be doing a presentation later this summer regarding the effect of standardized testing and why standardized testing is, in fact, the rudder that controls the entire ship of education.
Right.
Because once you start writing the tests, people will, in fact, teach to the standard.
We were in Hollis last night, and they had a Common Core event going on. And one of the teachers got up and he's just rattling off a whole bunch of books. And hey, that sounds good. You know, all these books sounded really, wow, that's good for you. You know, Iliad and the Odyssey and all that kind of stuff. But he forgot to mention that in one of the schools, one of the required readings was 16 minutes. Wasn't there a recent controversy over the 16 minutes? Do you remember that?
Yes, in fact, I saw Mr. Bear the other night at a function in Concord with his two wonderful kids. He's hired a pretty good lawyer, and intends to take on the Guilford School Board. They got caught.
They got caught, exactly.
Okay, and they hate getting caught.
Well, HB 542, right, was passed when you and I were both back in 2011, 2012, which allowed parents to have some say in
That's
this,
right.
except the school board has managed to say we can't disclose what is on the tests, so you can't use this particular means of saying, I don't agree with that curriculum, to get out of this.
This is going to blow your mind, but at this meeting last night, there was one teacher that got up, or one person that was on the school board, or one of the towns voted out Common Core. And they brought up the fact that, well, why didn't anybody listen? Well, the explanation will blow your mind, because it doesn't matter. Basically what they said, what they wanted to do, your petitions or whatever the parents were saying was null and void, because it wasn't submitted properly. And so what that tells you is that you as a parent will not have local control, even through your school board, with this whole Common Core thing.
One of the worst things about Common Core to me is the damage it does to teachers. I'm sure that, you're a lot younger than I am, but I'm sure you had some wonderful teachers growing up that have stayed with you your whole life, and whether it was their personality or the fact that they took an interest in you as a kiddo, if you had a problem or an interest in...
And you do remember their names, too.
Of course you remember their names, and Common Core doesn't allow teachers to teach, to be creative, to use their natural abilities and their personalities to convey information to a child. It's very much by rote, whether they want to say that or not. But I think it's harmful to teachers, the people that we trust our children with every day.
I was talking to Anne Marie Banfield last night, and she was talking about one of the teachers saying, well, in the math setting, we're going to have a group discussion about these math problems. And she what? That's the worst thing you could possibly do. She hit me in the elbow. It's like, why? You're not going to get there from there by having a group discussion on, 5 plus 5 equals, 32. Oh, doesn't it make 30? Something like that.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's 10. The point is, they take out local control. And there is an agenda. If they can put in that smut, they can also put in anti-Second Amendment issues. They can put in rewriting history. And what say will you have over that as a parent?
That was the whole reason behind HB 542 back in 2011, right? The book at that point was a Bedford school district, right? And it was nickeled and dimed in America. And there was a huge outrage. In fact, someone ended up pulling their children out of the school over this. It was so offensive.
I would encourage my viewers to, if you don't believe me, Google 16 minutes, go to page 313, and see if you would be able to read that in public anywhere. This was required reading.
But the school boards won't notice. The school boards won't read it. The school boards won't allow it to be read in public.
Right.
WMUR wouldn't read it on.
It won't even post it.
One of the things that really troubles me, here's another thing, and this has to do with religion and faith and separation of church and state. When you read that paragraph in that book, you're listening to a boy put his hands over a little girl's mouth, and bad things are happening.
Right.
And he uses the name of the Lord Jesus Christ in such a way that it was horrific, and then more expletives after the event is done.
Right.
Now, in that setting, it was okay to use the Lord Jesus' name. However, if you would have a book that says, "Praise the Lord for all His goodness," and the Lord is my shepherd, well, that's unacceptable. That's
right.
It's okay to defame my faith. It's okay to defame the Lord Jesus, but my goodness, you can't say anything good about it, because that would be establishing religion. And I think if you bring up that argument, people have their eyes gloss over it. But it's important, because you're undermining the good values of certain homes without the parents' permission.
Oh, absolutely.
And then we all wonder, well, why is our society so bad?
This comes back to society as a whole is slowly moving to being more violent, right? But we're not addressing the core issue there. We want to pick on inanimate objects because they can't retaliate with a logical argument. At the end of the day, that doesn't work. We don't start banning Fords or Chevys because...
Or pressure cookers.
Or pressure cookers, right? But someone had a car accident. Lots of people are killed in car accidents, but we don't go and blame the cars.
Right.
That man on 89 South crossed the median in order to try to commit suicide and killed a young mother and her husband. That wasn't a firearm. That was
Right, and kids
car.
driving through college campuses trying to pick off people. So it's the intent, it's the zeitgeist or whatever you want to call it, the spirit of the day, where people there's something happening. So just because a few people have lost any type of morals, any type of ethics, any type of values, that doesn't give anybody the right to take away my right to defend myself or my family or my neighbors.
Well, and for those who actually choose to carry and those who go to the trouble to spend time at the range, it's not a cheap thing to go to the range every couple of weeks.
Well, kidding, if you could get 22, it would be less expensive.
But at the end of the day, let me finish. They believe that they have some level of a responsibility to protect both their family, those around them, right?
Absolutely.
Are they under attack right now, some of the shooting ranges?
Oh my goodness, yes. Oh gosh,
I mean, we
yes.
have one here in Nashua, and I just wonder, there seems to always be a backdoor attack, whether it's through the munitions, whether it's through legislation, whether it's through zoning. We'll figure this out. We'll get you off.
Oh no, absolutely. SIG saw this last year, and that again comes down to putting the right people in office. I don't want to see our industry pack up and leave. I don't want to see the further attrition of jobs out of the state through the policies that we're seeing that passed this past year in the legislature.
Are we losing fire ranges? Or are we losing?
We haven't lost any ranges per se, but I know SIG had to put in additional requirements and had to change some of their policies regarding shooting because of quote-unquote noise pollution. That range.
And they gave up building that range.
Are there any gun clubs in schools?
Well, interesting that you mentioned that in statute, and for the life of me, I should have brought it with me, but it is permitted in the education statutes to teach firearm education
Yes.
in the primary schools.
It's still in our statute.
It's legal.
I saw that in one of the, there was a post on YouTube, not YouTube, but on Facebook, so it had to be real. But there was this little boy in class, and he was showing, there was a rifle in class, and the teacher was showing him how to properly handle the gun.
It's in New Hampshire statutes. It's been there since the 50s or something.
Even before that. And there's a wonderful program called the Appleseed Project. I don't know if you're aware of it.
I've never heard of that.
It's a national group, and they teach firearm safety, but along with it, they teach the history of the United States.
The Revolutionary War Veterans Association, right, who does reenactments and other things, sponsors this.
Bob Duffy does that.
And they spend the weekend and they teach you to shoot 22 really well.
Right.
And you have to learn a little history along with it. So it's a great thing for kids.
Yeah, I bought my my grandson a BB gun, and just not too long ago, maybe it was 2-3 weeks ago, and the first thing I taught him was muzzle safety. Nothing like this. No, that's an accident. You've automatically killed me. There wasn't even a BB in the thing, but I probably drove that in his head 30-40 times. And Grandpa, would you please, right? But it's important. You don't point it. I went through all the hunter safety and before you could go, and the kid got it. He knows it now, and the safety has to be on, the whole 9 yards. But we went out into the back and we shot some bottles or something. Not in a pit. Grandpa, this is really fun. And I'm thinking, yeah, of course this is fun. Every kid wants to do this. It's cool. But it's just teaching them how to properly handle the firearm. It's part of a rite of passage, and there's safety.
Right.
That
If they learn it young, they're safe most of their whole life. And it's kind of funny because I've been a firearm owner for a very, very long time, and it wasn't until I started going through some training courses that I realized the bad habits that I'd had all these years. I thought I was pretty safe and pretty smart, but until I went through with a really good instructor an analysis of how I held and used my firearm, I've learned a lot, and which is what drove me to become an instructor. Because boy, if I've got bad habits,
Oh, sure.
You should not ever acquire them. So I'm having a lot of fun with that. I basically teach women.
More and more women should be carrying.
Oh, yeah.
It's
More and more women do, darling.
Yeah, I know that. I know that.
And ultimately, society isn't getting any safer. I wish I could say it was. Israel learned this a long time ago, right? They arm their teachers. They arm a bunch of public servants. Everybody serves in the military over there.
So Netherlands are the same way, right? Everyone's
No, I believe it's Sweden.
Sweden?
Yeah. But at the end of the day, it's a very right, and they have terrorists knocking at their door all the time, and schools are valuable targets in the eyes of terrorists.
Right.
So
Soft targets, right.
They're soft targets, but they're valuable targets. Children matter. So Israel learned this a long time ago. Protect those targets. Harden them up.
It's just an important issue, and I'm glad that you came on. So it's PackingNH.
.org, yes.
.org. And you can, if they want to be friends on Facebook, you have to be invited to.
You must be known to one of us.
Okay.
Because there's a lot of folks out there that just
We don't want to spend time
Start
bannering
trouble.
bannering back and forth
Right.
over issues, right? This is purely more of a online forum to discuss what's going on in other states. The Supreme Court ruling that just came down that if you give a gift of a firearm to one of your children, you're a felon.
Yes.
I'm not sure that was the intent of the law.
Right.
Yes, 5-4 decision this past week.
Yeah.
So.
The question of the straw man, but the forum is you can find all sorts of things, training. We put a lot of things up. I put a lot of things up talking about women in firearms. We do firearms reviews. We talk about how we bring new jobs to the state. We look at court rulings. We're not out there hammering politicians. That's going to be PackingNH.
Yes.
And people can donate to this as well?
Yes, so there's
Yes,
a
we've been
website.
actively raising money, and we're going to start a big campaign just in the next week or so as we approach the
Do you raffle off firearms and things?
And not done that yet, but maybe.
Probably will.
Yeah.
We've been involved in a number of events where firearms have been raffled off, and the generosity of firearms dealers here and donors, and it's been a great fun. We, in fact, last December, was it?
Yeah,
When
last
was it?
December we gave away an AR-15.
Right down here in downtown Nashville.
Yes.
Now, do you have any sponsors as far, like them, like Riley's or other?
Well,
No, we don't have sponsors. We are a political action committee,
Okay.
and we follow the laws.
yeah, so there are restrictions on what PACs can do, and we have to report the donations.
Yes.
Honestly, this is a great opportunity for those who care about firearms to come out and support the other firearms owners, and to make sure our legislation isn't going the same direction that Connecticut and New York did.
Right.
Honestly, I think all of us care about our state. That's why
Live
we're
free or
involved.
die. Live free or die.
Yes.
Well, thank you again for coming on Speak Up, and
Thank you for having us.
and
Thank you,
if there's an
Kevin.
event, please come on the show, and we'll definitely
Love to
let
be
you have
back.
a voice here in Nashville.
And we'll be sure to invite you to ours.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you
Great.
very much.
Thank you much.
Thanks.
All right. And that's it for now. Thank you for watching Speak Up. If you want to get in touch with PackingNH, you know how to do it. And, our rights are always under attack, forever vigilant. That's what our founders wanted us to be. And it seems like more than ever that we need to be protecting all our rights, both our First Amendment rights all the way to the 27th. Every one of them seems to be under attack these days. But today we're talking about the Second Amendment.
Thank you much.
Thank you again. Until next week. If you would like to be a guest on Speak Up, please contact me at speakupnh@gmail.com. We'll help you be heard.
Every day, citizens around the country are faced with new dilemmas that affect them profoundly. Whether it's injustice, discrimination, falling through the cracks, scandals and cronyism, balances of power, ethics, religious freedoms, state versus citizens, and unfunded mandates, and the list goes on and on and on. Welcome to Speak Up. It's directed at those who have fallen through the cracks, and it gives them a voice. It's your turn to speak up. to stand up and fight back.
The preceding program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.